Hello everybody, I am Follygon and welcome back to another 2D to 3D video where I take a 2D concept or image of a character, much like Klaus here, and translate that into a 3D digital character. Before we get in and talk about the process though, click that subscribe button if you are new around here, and check out gumroad.com/Follygon for things like my courses, brushes, and materials. With this character, I start off by creating the basic shape of a head, and then very quickly divert from where I would normally go here. So I got this really blocky shape in for a nose and brow, and very soon you'll see me start to put in the form for a mustache and start pulling out a very rough beard. With this character, it's a lot different because he's very simplified. A lot of the time, simplified does not mean easy though, so we're trying to move quick, trying to get in a lot of these basic shapes to act as a base. From there, after we have those pieces in, we can start to develop on those even more and get them to feel a little bit more accurate. With sculpture, you have to have a base to continue to working the form from. You can't just create a perfectly accurate character from nothing right away. It has to be built up in steps. And that first step is what is called the blockout, which is what I'm working on right now. This is the point of the process where you work on your major shapes and your silhouette. For this right here, you can see me starting to already get in some of the larger forms for the nose, starting to refine those a little bit more, the larger body, the larger proportion, and then I'm starting to make sure that I have all my parts and pieces in there, meaning adding in some quick ears, a little bit of that hair, and just kind of continuing to develop from there. A lot of this is very inaccurate at this stage. When you are just starting out and starting to get those different pieces in there like I am right now for that front piece of the hair, when I insert that tube of geometry like I've just done, I'm not expecting that to be perfect after I just draw it on in one brush stroke. The software is not going to do it for you. It is a digital tool, and there are a lot of powerful little things in here that do not exist in traditional sculpture, but that still doesn't mean it's going to be perfect with just one little press of a button. So we're going to have to take some time here to refine and build up our shapes very slowly. As you can see with the face, I've started to define a lot more of the planes around that area. I've started to kind of pull down that lower outside corner of the eye socket, creating this kind of baggy eye effect. I've even started to get a little bit of paint in there. That helps me to just orient my eyes a little bit better. But it's definitely a slow process here to build up a lot of these shapes. With the beard, which was kind of my favorite part to work on for this character, a lot of fun, you can see that I've taken that larger shape that I started with, and I've split that up into these 7 different segments here. And then from there, I can start working on each of those individually to start creating a more visually interesting and, of course, accurate shape, being the main thing here as we translate this character to 3D. And then, of course, moving on to the back of the head to create a little bit more form back there for the ponytail. A lot of this stuff is really rough and defined later, but as I've mentioned already, that's kind of how we work here. Very soon, coming up here in just a second, I'm going to start working on adding the color to my character, start painting him up, getting him to feel a little bit more like the character. One of my favorite parts of the process, but when you are working on a stylized character like this, it's very, very difficult to get the colors accurate. So every color that I use here at first is directly sampled from the film. And that means that there is a lot of different lighting and different situations going on in the film that can cause the colors to be not as accurate as you would like them to be. So I use a couple different scenes here that I pull from for my color sampling initially, and then I start kind of working on those a little bit more just by using my eye. Just kind of not necessarily guessing, but starting to get them into a more neutral, delit state. So I start off with this darker kind of nighttime scene that's a little bit more cool, and then I find this kind of indoor lighting scene where he is lit, I think, by a fireplace or a couple lamps or something like that. It's in his workshop by now. Then I start blending between those colors. And you can see that as I do that, I'm still kind of sculpting and working on some different stuff, so a lot of stuff at the same time, but very slowly starting to work towards a more kind of neutral, delit state, as I mentioned before. It is really tough to work on those colors and start kind of eyeballing them and getting them into this state that feels really nice and accurate towards that final character. There are just so many situations where the character is under different lighting that it becomes really difficult. It's not like something where you have a color key information like a Mickey Mouse red that you can just go and pull from. With something like this, all you pretty much have are some screenshots from the film, and you can attempt to go from there. But as you can see here, now the colors have shaped up a lot better, and we're continuing to work on that beard. Like I said, the beard was one of my favorite parts to work on for this character. I've started to build up a lot of the volumes there, make it a lot more visually interesting, as well as started to soften a lot of those forms. I start off working really rough, much like I do with anything else, keeping things kind of in that rough state for as long as possible, and then I start to refine and get them to feel a little bit more fluffy as we continue forward. By this point, I've also worked on the face a lot more, started to refine a lot of the shapes there. For example, the brow and nose of this character were, of course, just tubes of blocky geometry at first, but now I've started to refine those a lot more, and you'll see those shape up even more as we continue forward. I'm still getting in some of the kind of important pieces that I should have done later on, but aren't super important until we start to get some more color on the character. Things like the eyebrows, which I keep super simple for those poly modelers out there. I use the Z modeler brush here, which allows me to essentially keep those as low poly simplified pieces of geometry up there, and then I can just kind of pre-visualize a smooth form for those. A little bit more complicated if you guys don't do any digital sculpting or 3D modeling, but essentially it is a very simplified piece that is a little bit more technical than artistic. Falls a little bit more in the in-between spectrum there. Back on down to the mustache to do a little bit more shaping up down there. Anytime I got to work on hair on this character, I kind of took my time on it because I was really enjoying myself. Sculpting hair is one of those things that I think is really difficult, but when you actually kind of get into a flow with it, it can become very relaxing. As you can see here with the beard, I've now gotten in and started to combine those pieces, and I'm going through and trimming in between the cracks to begin kind of infilling that, starting to blend between the different segments and keep them a lot more soft up towards the top of the shape. And then more towards the bottom where they split into those different kind of larger sections that I initially split, I'm keeping them a little bit more separated so that you can still easily read those larger sections. Overall, creating this really nice balance between this one larger shape up towards the face and then splitting off into these different segments of visual interest as it goes down towards the bottom. And even at this stage, I am still making larger proportional changes to this character. Here I am on the face, starting to narrow in the larger shape of the face as it goes down from the eye socket area into the jaw. Also, you'll notice that the face looks really derpy, really silly here by itself. Really, any character or anything that you're working on, if you just look at one of those different segments, it feels a little bit awkward. Here without the beard, Klaus is feeling a little bit more like a biker or something like that, but he's still looking good, and I've started to taper in that larger shape of the face, and even just a little change like that really starts to make that feel a little bit more accurate there. A little bit more cleanup to the hair to get that feeling a little bit more on character. A lot of this is just kind of working on a lot of different pieces at once to make sure that they're all kind of lining up correctly. It can get a little confusing as you add more and more subtools, which is what they are called here in ZBrush. Essentially, this is the different polygon islands or different sections of digital clay. I've worked on pieces that have hundreds of different sections, and like here, this is just one tiny piece here for the eyebrow, but as you can see, I had to go back and correct some stuff to make that bottom edge feel a little bit more accurate to the actual character as that wrapped around to the bottom, making sure that that is a nice, clean, and softer transition. But yes, it's very easy to forget about a little piece like this and just kind of continue forward working on the larger shape. It's also very easy to get tunnel vision though and focus in on one section and not worry about the whole, so you have to find that nice middle ground for sure. Onto the eyes for some quick poly paint here. This was pretty simple stuff. I just infilled this larger kind of blue color here. I added a little bit of a gradient to this by making it a bit darker at the top, and then I just took a black color or a slightly off black color that I just sampled from the film and inset that for the larger shape of the pupil. And of course, it's always okay to take a step backwards and make large changes even here towards the end. So I am completely flattening the top of his head, kind of like he got squashed by an anvil in a Bugs Bunny cartoon or something like that. The top of the head was actually a lot more flat than what I had there for the character. That's one thing you have to realize about a lot of these stylized cartoony characters. They often have a lot of proportions that are tweaked quite to the extreme. I mean, just look at the guy's brow and nose. Very interesting shapes going on there. The same thing is happening with the top of the head. You can't be afraid or hesitant to make larger changes later on. I know it's really easy to get attached to what you're working on, but you have to treat it like you're working on something for a client sometimes, and imagine that your client said, "Hey, this is wrong, you need to fix it," and you can't hold on to your precious child. You just need to go through and start to make those changes as quick as possible. I was noticing the nose was looking a little bit too sharp, so I go back through and soften some of the form there. And this is something that I think a lot of you will enjoy. I duplicated the eyeball and set the color and material to the same as my skin tone, and started to pull that down into that larger eye cavity to create the bag for the eye. I thought it was a really cool and quick way to work there, and anytime that you can reuse pieces of geometry or form to repurpose them into something else, I think that that is a really smart way to work. And then, of course, working on that face a little bit more as I kept toggling that on and off, I noticed that he needed a little mouth underneath that large beard. So I give him a nice, cute little mouth there. That can be our little secret, don't tell anybody. And then, of course, just a little bit more work here on the beard. I am using the inflate brush here. It's something that I've been trying to use a lot more. I typically don't like to use it too often because it's a little hard to control, but I'm trying to get better at it. It's not something that I typically use in my repertoire. I am more a clay brush kind of guy that I'll build stuff up and then go back through and soften the form from there. But I've been trying to work with the inflate brush just a little bit more to kind of branch out, try out some new tools. It's very easy to get kind of pigeonholed and use the same tools over and over. But even with all that said, I do go back over it with a clay brush just a little bit to blend between a few of the larger sections. It was feeling a little bit warbly to the point where it wasn't really feeling like hair. I still wanted that to be nice and clean and smooth, and some of that just got a little bit too messy there at the end. Finally, heading into adding some asymmetry here with a little bit of pose, a little bit of expression, more so than anything else. I took this directly from the film, from a screenshot. That's how I gather all my references for things like this. I just hopped into the film, scrolled around, and then grabbed a couple screenshots. But like I said, very simple here for the expression. If you guys were watching during Sculptober, then you heard me talk about my nice little secret cheat for adding expression. Luckily, though, this was one taken directly from the film, so it doesn't feel quite like cheating. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, a nice, quick, really easy way to add expression to a character is just offset the brows and the mouth slightly. This is a great way to add just a little bit of asymmetry. Your eyes and mouth are so expressive that pretty much all expression from the face comes from those two areas. So you really don't have to make too much of a change there to, well, completely change how the character feels. That is just one of the reasons why faces are super, super difficult to work on. The smallest little bit of change there can make a huge difference for the character in terms of, feeling as accurate to the original piece as possible. Which I think we did pretty good here on for just a couple hours of sculpting here in ZBrush. I could, of course, spend a little bit more time on this, but I think we're starting to feel a lot like the character, so now it's time to go into the polishing stage to start cleaning up what I already have. This is when I'm less worried about adding in anything extra here at the end, but more so cleaning up what I already have. Some of this stuff I think a lot of people probably wouldn't notice, but a lot of it is just kind of cleanup and refinement to make sure things are looking as good as possible. The stage of polishing is something that I think a lot of people maybe take for granted. They don't really consider it all that important, but it really is. It's the thing that makes a character go from feeling like it might look like the character to feeling, really on brand, or it goes from feeling pretty good, maybe a few messy areas here and there that most people might not notice, into just being a really nice, hence the word polished, very clean finished character here. So a lot of jumping around, working on things like the hair, the face, a lot of cleanup here at the end, and then of course a nice little turntable for you guys so you can see the full thing finished up here in ZBrush, and then we'll hop on over and check out that finished render. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and the process. If you guys want to learn more about digital sculpting, you can check out my course at appeal.academy. There's a link down in the description, as well as a link to my Gumroad where you can find things like my brushes and materials. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Click that subscribe button if you are new around here. You guys have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I will see you in the next video.